What is going on, guys? Joey here with my good friend Brian Miner. Brian, why don't you tell people why they should listen to you?
What's up, everyone? First, thanks for having me on. I've been waiting to debut on the Flex podcast for quite some time. No, but yeah, this is looking forward to this discussion. As far as why you should listen to me.
Because I said so.
I have experience in both. Competing. I'm a coach myself. I've got a background in health and exercise science. Not that that's required, but I like to think that I practice what I preach, and I think I have a pretty, I guess, dynamic approach to this situation. It depends on the person. A lot of the questions that we got asked were there wasn't one single answer, and there's really, that's how everything is in fitness. There's never a single answer to a question. It's all context dependent.
Yep.
And rather than just, I think we sort of saw the pendulum swing the other direction. We used to have people asking questions that were wanting black and white answers, and then it sort of became in vogue to say, like, it depends, but then not really elaborate on anything. And so, like, no shit, it depends, but like, what is it dependent on? So yeah. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions.
And a lot of the questions that we got are, like he said, it's context dependent. It's like maybe they're asking specifically about them, but we don't really know anything about the person, so we can only provide like general information as far as that goes. But one of the main reasons why I wanted to have Brian on is that Brian, he has experience in both powerlifting and bodybuilding. I would say that in bodybuilding you have gotten like truly lean, like lean enough to the point where I think, I would agree that, anyone that does the natural bodybuilding thing, even bodybuilding in general, even if it's like enhanced, your conditioning was crazy. I thought you were like, super, super lean. And I think your powerlifting showed, especially like in your back, your posterior chain. And that's really hard for people to do just because, I can't tell you, like, more people get on stage, I feel, like, out of shape. You know what I mean? So Brian literally, like, did what he had to do. We'll talk about, how I feel like off-season powerlifting probably helped that, and a lot of different stuff when it comes to that. You've done the Arnold how many times? 3 times?
3.
Nice.
Yeah, 2015 through 2017.
Brian's one of the contributing factors to me wanting to do that meet. There's just this sick picture he posted of like someone deadlifting in like the giant crowd in front of them, and I was like, damn, I'm gonna do that.
Oh yeah, I remember it. That's
years ago, dude.
I believe that was actually Mike Kedleski, is the person deadlifting in that photo. So, I remember getting to the Arnold and being like sort of disappointed, because it wasn't like on a platform and stage like that, but it's still like the sickest environment you can lift in.
Yeah.
Better than IPF World or anything.
Oh, dude. Nationals and Arnold is like what I look forward to. Worlds is like, it's more like a business thing. It's like a we gotta win. It's not like a really fun thing. So, so to start this off, I just wanted to kind of talk about, as far as your perception of it, I guess you could say, the relationship between powerlifting and bodybuilding, in a sense that a lot of the questions also were like, if you're a powerlifter, right, you're training the big three, that is like your focus, right? How much additional bodybuilding work on top of that would you say somebody should do if they care about looking good on stage, like being complete? Obviously, that's going to depend a lot on the person, but, like, let's say we have, like, a blank slate. This guy responds pretty much well to everything.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is, how much powerlifting volume are you doing?
Sorry about that, guys. We had to change our scenery real quick just to make sure everything was, good on the connection end. What were we talking about? We were talking about, so I said if you're powerlifting, assuming, and then you had brought up volume, assuming you're doing sufficient volume in order to progress, like you're progressing fine in your powerlifting, but you want to, like like you'll have two people. One guy only does the squat, bench, deadlift, right? And then another guy is training powerlifting or bodybuilding stuff on top of it, right? What would that second guy do in order to complete the physique? I guess you could say.
Yeah. I think most powerlifting programs that are, the bottom line intent is, to get bigger or to get stronger in the big three. Most of those, they hit all of the primary musculature. I mean, even a powerlifting program is going to have accessory movements.
Yeah.
And I assume that's sort of assuming that there's some well-rounded or at least, well thought out accessory components to that. But, outside of, a kind of, bare bones powerlifting program, it's like biceps and medial delts. Like that, those are like the two biggest things, it's like and even biceps. I mean, you'll get hit, with pulling movements, medial delts, even then, like they still get hit with like overhead press. And so there's a lot more overlap than I think a lot of people think. And I think the balance, it's managing the dose, and I'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but it's managing the dose of that high intensity work, because that carries a greater cost per set, I should say, in terms of demand and recovery. So you want to, if you're trying to kind of balance both, you want to dose that high intensity work carefully enough where it's like you don't want to push past the point of diminishing returns there. You just want to do enough to progress, and kind of operate sort of on the lower end of that volume range, and then kind of allocate those other resources to more developmental movements.
So the point that I really want to punch home is that they're a lot closer than people think. I think powerlifting, people see powerlifting. All right, so maybe old school. Actually, I don't know. Old school bodybuilding, they did do compound movements, a lot of them, and a lot of them still do. But like, let's say you have like a chest, back, arms, those type of splits, right? Those are what I think a lot of people think is like a bodybuilding split. But a well-structured, in my opinion, people that know what they're doing these days that program powerlifting, it's gonna pretty much cover everything. Literally, like, so when I program people, we have squat, bench, deadlift, and then I have a lot of like rowing. Rowing is in there. Occasionally, I'll put in like lateral raises, but like face pulls are in there. Some people are gonna have one of my guys that I'm thinking of right now. He has like crazy medial delts, and we literally don't do it. Like, I guess he gets it from bench. You know what I mean? Some guys are gonna. Would you say some people can build their lats from just deadlifting, conventional deadlift specifically? Like, it's weird. Like, some guys have it. I don't know. Some people, they just get it from.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely genetic outliers that get development where you're kind of scratching your head, like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
What could this be attributed to? But yeah, I think when it comes down to it, and I look at, if I go to like Raw Nationals, and I walk in and I see, the 93 kilo class, just the class I compete in, like those are some jack dudes, it's like no one's hurting for development at that level. And you look at off-season bodybuilders, like off-season natural pro bodybuilders, and it's a very similar look. It's not like you could look at them side by side, elite, level lifters, an elite level 93 who's, the same level of body fat as an elite level, natural pro in the off season, and necessarily be able to tell the difference between the two.
It's more like the conditioning, obviously, is, when people think bodybuilder, they think stage, right? They don't see, that, like you said, you could have an off-season bodybuilder that's like mindful of their body fat. They're going to look very, very similar to a powerlifter, and I mean, this comes up all the time. Obviously, there's probably no one that you're going to recommend to be that unbelievably lean unless that's just like where they are. I mean, which people aren't stage. I mean, there's people that are close to stage lean, but like for powerlifting purposes, I think, I mean, can you talk about kind of what you went through? I remember you telling me when you were dieting down your bench, like you just started feeling not good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that strength scales with weight class, and I think a lot of people forget that. It's
Yeah.
everyone that wants to diet down, they kind of want to operate on the assumption that I'll diet down, I'll do it slow enough, I'll retain all of my strength, and it just that's not how it works.
Weight moves weight too. So
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's weight moves weight. I mean, that's a way of saying that's like the bigger you are, the more advantageous generally your like tissue leverages are going to be. And you can have a fat loss phase. It's like looking at the things that are within your control in a dieting phase in terms of retaining strength. I mean, you obviously have the muscle retention aspect. It's like you want to diet slow enough, eat enough protein, so you're not losing more muscle mass than you should. You want to maintain proficiency in the lift. You want to keep like some high intensity work in there for like the neurological aspect of things. But there's a side of it, the way the mechanics of the lift change that trump all of that.
Yeah.
It's like you can do everything perfectly and still see your bench or your squat plummet. Depending on how you squat, or just depending on your individual biomechanics. And so like I don't think people realize just how much the mechanics impact strength. And when it comes to dropping a weight class, you're all of a sudden, I developed some shoulder issues because all of a sudden, your range of motion on bench is greater. My mobility wasn't as good. So I was like getting into like internal rotation at the bottom of the lift. And like I was getting some like anterior shoulder discomfort. And so, it banged me up pretty good, at least on bench. Deadlift is always kind of the most forgiving of the three for most people.
If you think about it, on the lifts where you have to kind of coil up, you're not going to have as much of you there to kind of help you control and support the weight. So now you've already built up all this strength with this, minimal, right? It's like a couple inches, whatever, maybe not even an inch, but you have more ROM now, but you've already built up the strength. So now you're working an area that you're not really too strong from, right? It's like a different type of stress, so then you start to feel it. And then, you actually pulled out squats completely coming into your show, right?
Coming into the show, yeah. There comes a point where, well, to back up for a sec, I mean, I did a meet as an 83, like on the way down.
That was
during prep. And it was like it looked cool, but it wasn't fun. Like it was by no means my best performance. And so it's after that I really had no reason to justify leaving squats in. You always want to look at what is your long-term goal, but more importantly, what is your short-term, what is the short-term objective that's going to get you to that long-term goal? And if in the short term you don't need or have use for a competition lift, then there's no reason to leave it in. Unless like if you're like, for me, the priority immediately as soon as I stepped off the platform became, okay, now for this final dig in contest prep, I need to make sure that I'm retaining as much muscle as possible. And in order to do that, I needed an exercise where I could, for lack of better words, connect with the muscle better. Not that they weren't getting trained. I mean, anytime you extend the knee against load, you're going to be, challenging yourself. But I went to like hack squats, is kind of my bread and butter movement, just because it was less dependent on, I didn't need a big midsection. Like I wasn't relying on, my girth to get me through it. And so it was a better stimulus for the level of effort that I was putting in.
I was going to say, I mean, I haven't dieted for a show, but when, I was going to, but then we did a meet, and then I was like, I'm not doing it. But what was I going to say? Yeah, so like someone had asked, since we're on the topic, if we could touch on like kind of the mindset or the goal, like the mindset of your dual athlete, in a sense, like what are your priorities of each? I think for me, and this is like it's a very strong like kind of like little voice in my head that's like when I'm eating into a meet, it's like you need to make sure you're hitting your protein times. You need to make sure you're hitting your carbs. You need to make sure that, you know, like today I'm squatting, and usually like when I do these podcasts, I don't eat till like after, right? But I'm like, nah, I want to have a good squat today. You know, I just started introducing deadlifts back in like freaking 6 weeks out. And, you know, I want to make sure that I'm recovering and things like that. So like I'm eating, like I'm making sure that I'm not skipping meals and I'm hitting my timings and things like that. Whereas like when I'm dieting, it's like I make sure that I'm like in the deficit. You know what I mean? So everything else kind of comes after. You know, if the goal is to diet, then I have to just disconnect my mind from like what I need to do to be strong, and like still try to be strong. But you know, if I only have X amount of food to work with, once I hit that cap, that's it. Like, you know, I that is like the first thing that I need to check off, and then after that, it's like, okay, did I make sure that I had enough carbs pre-training? You know, how many days have I gone without a refeed? Am I starting to feel like shit now? Should I hit a carb up or whatever? So did you find it kind of hard for yourself to transition from like powerlifting to bodybuilding, where like, fuck, I don't want to lose my strength? Or were you just like, nah, man, like I need to, you know, forget my strength. I'm just going to do what I can and make sure that I'm getting lean.
Yeah, you know, I think it being my third prep and just sort of understanding, you know, having managed my expectations, it was honestly pretty easy for me this time around. In the past, it was, you know, it messes with your head a bit. You know, it's especially like if you, you know, came from the school of thought, it's like, okay, if you're, you know, strength is the best, you know, proxy for muscle retention on the way down. So when I was losing strength on squat, I was, you know, sort of freaking out, like, oh my God, I'm like atrophy, you know, there's bad things are happening. But really, I mean, that strength is sort of a measure for muscle retention. That it's true, but it's more like performance across multiple sets, and it's more correlated with like isolation movements, you know, things that are less skill dependent, or less complicated multi-joint lifts. So like, you know, something like a you know, leg extension, I bet my performance, like it didn't drop off much at all, you know, versus a squat. And so once you sort of realize and understand the foundational principle of like, I need to be providing sufficient, you know, mechanical tension to, you know, keep the stimulus in place to retain muscle.
That's actually,
then it's easy to brush other shit off.
That's actually like I'm always thinking about why people do things. Why? If you're dieting, it makes more sense to kind of add in those little accessory movements, because you're not going to feel as good on the lifts that are more kind of easier to do when you do have more body fat. So it makes sense, like, you know, if your bench is starting to feel like shit, maybe you're hitting more dumbbells, maybe you're doing more pec flies, or, you know, whatever, something for your medial delts, like a crazy close grip skull crusher or something. Like, so it kind of makes sense, you know, why bodybuilders are so lean. Maybe they don't squat because it feels like shit, and they're just not, maybe they're not good at it. Maybe they feel better loading 1,000,000 pounds on the leg press. Maybe at the start of your prep, let's say you were a guy that did leg press as you were a powerlifter, and then leading into your prep, if you kept the leg press in, yeah, your squat's going down, but maybe your leg press, you maybe lose like a plate, you know, off your top set of 12 or something. You know what I'm saying? Which kind of brings me into the next thing on my list. So, you know, I want to, like 5-ish years ago, when the DUP happened, right? You know, tracking tonnage was all the rage, right? And I still think that being able to, well, one, I think people did so much. They used to do a lot more work than what they actually needed to progress, right? So now we have this thing called MRV, right? So you want to do enough to progress at an appreciable rate, but you don't want to just do the max that you can possibly recover from. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you could be doing more. Well, you know, where are you going to go? And now you have to desensitize and start over and stuff. So I just wanted to talk about, you know, tracking tonnage with percentage. And then you have tracking the weights that you're using, you know, with RPE. And how, you know, one helps. Like, I would say that tracking the loads that you're lifting using RPE is going to help you kind of stay within what you need to progress enough like to keep the ball going, keep the ball rolling. Whereas like before, it's like, all right, I did 25,000 tons of fucking squat volume this week, and like I have to do 30,000 tons, or I'm not gonna make any gains next week. You know what I'm saying? Like relative work versus like just assigning a set tonnage and trying to beat.
I mean that's sort of the premise of any auto regulation tool. Our level of preparedness, our level of strength is going to vary day to day. And so, I get, some of my athletes or, I get questions on Instagram, do you prefer percentages versus RPE? And, there's not a preference of one over the other necessarily.
Essentially, an RPE is a percent on the day. We're just not going, sometimes we're not going through that trouble.
Like what we're trying to do with RPE is get a balance between the training stimulus. So like if I said, I want you to get the most specific training stimulus possible for today, that's going to, drive up your 1RM the most, you would be doing like singles at a 9 or a 10. It's like the most specific high, and just be doing multiple, obviously, like that's how you'd be improving your volume.
Yeah, obviously that's not like sustainable.
Yeah, so what RPE is doing is it's in conjunction with the overall volume that you're doing, is it's steering the direction of the stimulus. It's making sure, that you're getting a sufficient stimulus for where you're at in the block, but it's balancing it with kind of the recovery cost of that, for that given stage. And so, early in a block, if you structure a block that gets, increasingly more difficult, which I'd say most of them do, RPEs may be a bit lower, and, that's to control fatigue. It's to manage fatigue so that you have room to continue to push in subsequent weeks. And so all a percentage is doing is like, there's nothing inherently magical about, 80%. It's not like 79 is like trash and then 80 and plus above is, strength. It's just trying to like, it's a best guess, taking the average population, it's a best guess to get you to that requisite level of effort for a given day. So like if everyone was robots and everybody could very accurately track, their RPEs, there would be really no use for percentages.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, with a lot of submaximal work, or, if you're accruing volume at lower RPEs, like it's hard for a lot of people, to do like, do an 8 at, 4 sets of 8 at a 5 RPE, it's like, okay, that's like, there's, it doesn't need to be perfect, but an RPE will, or a percentage will, it'll kind of idiot proof it, it's like, okay, this will, and so what I do is, I'll program with assigned loads, on some lifts, or I should say, not necessarily assigned loads, but like a provided load, that they can sort of use in the back of their head, and then the RPE is the anchor from which they adjust that. So it's
that's how a chart can be mildly useful to kind of get a ballpark of like, all right, where is this? And then what I do, and I'm sure you do something similar, is like, okay, you have this percentage chart, but this doesn't really. This is not law. This is just like a kind of ballpark general idea. If you have no idea where to start, but what I want you to do is, rate your RPE after each set and kind of adjust as you go, or maybe, sometimes I will give them like a top number. Like, I want you to do this. I want you to do this, right? And then pull it down based on that. Hit a percentage or whatever. Or sorry, RPE. So basically, like, there's people that when they program, they're all about like tracking your numbers, like tracking tonnage, right? What I do, like, for myself, which I've seen great, probably the best success that I could anybody would look to get, coaching lifters, is I'll have them do, I'll track like sets and reps with a relative intensity range. Does that make sense? So like if you're doing 3 sets of 8 within this range, right? And then over time, so like on paper, I don't really necessarily need to see the number. I could literally go, the whole, I mean, I do think it's important to make little marks like, oh, this is a PR, like, at this point, I was very strong in my training, or at this part of the week, I'm stronger than this part of the week, and you can kind of see how it goes week to week. And then when I kind of find a sweet spot, we might be able to have consecutive weeks where we're increasing, but then it's going to eventually kind of drown out. But so yeah, their relative intensity, sets and reps. I really don't need to see numbers until the end. After we've done everything, after we've done all our 10 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, then I can look at, okay, like what was your best out of all of that? And then we can map out meet day, and then it's like, it's on it. You know what I mean? And teaching, I feel, do you teach lifters, like, do you try to really show them how to use RPE, or will you just be like, all right, this is not for you, here's percentage? Because
I encourage them. I definitely encourage them to, it's a skill, being objective, or like, it's hard. Like and really what we're trying to do, if we look at RPE, like it should be inversely correlated with, velocity, like the speed of the rep, and you have a lot of, lifters early on. Like I have a lifter just the other day, she sent me a video of her deadlift, and I had the top set like a double and an 8, and it looked like it was like at a 5,
But
and
for her, probably felt
for her, like
hard.
subjectively, it probably did feel like an 8. But as you gain more experience, like that inverse correlation becomes stronger.
Yeah, and then I feel like you get more. So having something that on paper looks pretty much identical with the coaching aspect of it, you're gonna get more out of it. So it's like, the first block with someone, they're gonna gain X amount of experience with you, and then that second block, that third block, let's say you guys start over again, you're doing another intro, they're gonna be so much better equipped now to get more out of that intro because they understand, okay, like I was sandbagging the shit out of everything, or like, all right, I was overshooting everything. And that's why, I think that is so valuable right there. Just guiding them through it and showing them. It's almost like you're holding their hand, you're like, their eyes are closed and you're like, hey, follow me this way. And then eventually they could just do it without even you taking them. They already know, okay, I know what this feels like. I know when I feel, this corridor, I know to turn left or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, the more in tune you become with the scale, the more valuable that skill set becomes. And like one thing that I found that I've been doing lately is like I'll program a top set. It's like the lower the reps and the higher the RPE, like the closer people are going to get, across all populations.
Yeah.
So, I'll program something semi-assertive, like a double and an 8. And then I'll just say, whatever load you get here, do 3 sets of 5 with, 70% of that, whatever that load was. And so it's auto-regulated for like what they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
Without being way off, but then it gives a percentage that gets them, like, takes the guesswork out of the back off work. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. I mean, I think it's a topic that, it doesn't get enough attention, like how to improve your ability to track RPE, but it's one of those things that just it just takes time. Like it just takes time and experience, but there's plenty of progress that can be made in the meantime. It's not, before people were, the RPE scale came to the forefront of resistance training, people were still getting jacked and, strong as hell off of percentages.
Do you write your own training out for yourself? Like when you're doing a meet, do you write your own stuff? Or do you just...
I have since, 2014. Yeah. So I haven't had a coach in a while. Yeah, right now I haven't.
Well, I wasn't implying that you had a coach. I was just asking if you read it out. Like I don't write out shit.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I just know what I'm supposed to do, like kind of based on where I am from competition.
No, and that's I would say I write it out just because that's how my brain works. But usually I'll take things like week to week, and a lot of people. I call
way too many audibles to like stick to anything, so I just.
No, and that's if you're.
That's ideal, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure.
It's so hard to do that with like I have my more experienced guys, like Sean, for example. He'll know what he'll have done it enough times with me when to make a call. You know what I mean? Like he'll be like, oh, okay, like, you know, I'm feeling roasted today, even though Joey has this down. I should tell him that and then pull it back. You know what I'm saying? Like they learn. There's times when I just like you know, maybe I'm feeling a little bit more fatigue, slightly more than I had anticipated, or maybe I go to Disneyland and I'm destroyed, and now I need to literally change. Dude, Disney, like it's so funny. Like I can squat 700 pounds, I'm fine, but going to Disneyland for 2 days, I was messed up for 10 days. 10 days, I was like, my back, my knees, ankles, everything was screwed. That part of
Maybe I go to Disneyland and get destroyed.
It was hard. Just standing there watching the floats was tough, man. But so also I think it's cool. Like when I go into training, like today I'm going into squat, and I don't even have a like I don't think of numbers. Some days when I know I'm going to feel good, I'll think of a range, but I'm not like, I need to hit this today. I'm just like, we'll see what I have. I'll go in, I'll see what I have, and then, okay, I see what I have for the day, and then you start to learn. I feel like we're just trying to get to, you know, back to what you said about back in the day, there was no RPE. They just, you know, there was like big guys were strong.
Like
and
you know that you adapt to a stressor, and it's like, I know, you know, I just imposed a greater stressor, you know, 3 days ago. I probably need to dial it back a little bit. Yeah. It's just
you start to become like in tune. Like there's something that I think more experienced lifters, they kind of know what to look for. Very experienced. I'm talking like you've done this for a long time. You've been literally lifting for 10 plus years, and you start to understand like, okay, I know what I need to experience. I mean, some do. I mean, we're kind of aware of what we're doing. I feel like some guys are just strong. They just lift. But you know, I try to find that sweet spot. I know what I'm kind of looking for, and I don't really need to think too much about it. And that's what I try to pass down to my people, is to give them this kind of a, like they could just get their training, and then there's, you know, it's like almost like an autonomous relationship between everything, and they don't really let the stress of training affect their outside life. Like, fuck, I wasn't strong today, I'm trash. Like now I'm gonna have a grumpy day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want them to understand the whole big picture. That's why. And you can tell someone, hey man, like, you know, this is going to be a tough week, but once we taper, you'll be good. But until they go through it, they're not really going to, they don't, like, you could tell someone that, but it's hard for them to just get it. You know what I mean? A lot of things I feel like, especially with RP, is like, you just got to experience it and come up with your own perception of what, you know, that stress is in order to know, like, what your limits are and what you want to kind of look for the next time you go through it. Tying into this topic, which is it's an interesting. I just did a video on it, but I wanted to kind of hear your take. Do you have? I mean, it's normal for people to experience kind of like mental burnout, in terms of like, maybe they just came off 3 competitions. You know, they're spaced out, and they're just like, I don't want to squat, bench, or deadlift. This also answers one of the questions that was asked in the off season. How far away will you get away from the big 3, and does that kind of tie into mentally what the person, I mean, that's of course what the person can handle?
Yeah, I think I mean, I experienced that firsthand. You know, I sort of took a step back last year, and you know, finishing up that prep. You know, I had been competing, you know, 3 straight years at the Arnold, you know, at nationals for 3 straight years. You know, some local meets for a couple of those. Then I had the contest prep. It's like I had been really busy. And at the end of my bodybuilding prep, it's like most people, they, you know, get off stage and they're like, okay, you know, I'm gonna hit the gym tomorrow. You know, I'm gonna rinse this dream tan off of me, and I'm gonna go have a good meal, and then I'm gonna go. You know, the work starts tomorrow for next season. You know, it's like for me, I was like, I'm done for like 4 weeks, you know. It's like I stepped off stage, and like
I don't think I lift anything.
I think I went into the gym 3 times in 4 weeks just and got like a mild pump, like just honestly more for psychological reasons than anything.
Would you say that's something because of your bodybuilding prep? You were just like fucking roasted, or is it something that happens with powerlifting too, where you'll finish a meet and or was it less in powerlifting where like you'll finish a meet and you'll be like, I'll just take a week, or do you train that week or what?
No, you know, with powerlifting, well, one, I think it's it's very dependent on the individual what their strategy is post meet, or when their next meet is in proximity to that. But I think time off is really feared in the powerlifting community. People think they'll detrain, or they know the importance of volume and like needing to progress the stress, and like that's true.
Some people are going to detrain really fast. Like they're right. I mean, they will. Some girls, if they take a month off, that's going to take a long time to get it back.
Oh, absolutely.
So you don't want to do that, but
yeah. And I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying I think when I look at it goes back to like looking at wide lens thinking and saying what is the bottleneck in a powerlifting career, and it's most often just based off observation, injury. And so you want to manage that. And that's hard to do, especially with younger lifters that don't have any aches and pains. They're like, I'm fine, like throw it at me. But I'm in my, I'm 34. Like I've developed some, nagging, aches and pains like in my knees. And so I have a respect for that now. It's like I have a respect for the time off aspect. And I know that, some of that is from piling on too much earlier on in my, training career. So I try to sort of be that voice of reason to my younger athletes. And I'm not saying like all of them need to take a week off. But if they're, a lot of them, it's, I usually give them the option. I'll say, I want you to at least take, 48 hours off, 72, let your body just recover. Like, let's drop all like systemic fatigue, eat in a surplus for a few days, just chill. And then we can slowly ease back into things. If you want to step foot in the gym and just kind of do some bro work, just get some blood flowing, active recovery, that's fine. But I'm not like adamant that people are back in there like squatting the next day. And it's not necessarily even that I'm opposed to it. It's just so it's so dependent on the individual, how, their outlook. Like, it's just like, I couldn't do it. Just because I'm not like contending for a national championship. It's I have no reason to do it.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be my, the best version of, myself as a lifter, like I know I need to manage my, long-term, joint integrity and just mental outlook on the sport.
I think for most people, I'll give them 2-3 days. If they're ready to go. For some people, if like we were dealing with something, I'll just be like, we're gonna go really light this week, or you can take the week or whatever. But we do have those guys that are like, they just finished and they're like, I want to go right now. But part of it, I feel like also is maybe they see their competition is like on vacation, or they have an injury and they're gaining on them, and they want to like, all right, this is my chance to like kind of like they're going away for a couple months. This is my chance, right? I don't want to let this person catch me or whatever. So I feel like that, which is interesting. This is a social media aspect, right? This has something to do with like external motivators, right? Seeing that number one slot that you're so close to, I was talking about it yesterday in a video where like, if they get hurt or they're gone or whatever, like that's empowering for them. So they want to, like right now, everybody's thinking about not everybody, but a lot of guys are thinking about nationals because they're like top 5 and they want to be number 1. You know what I mean? So I do think to some point, if you're young and you have the joints and you have the health and you're this close, you only live once. You might as well give it everything and try to see if you can get it. See if you can get number 1. See if you can get top 3. See if you can, do that. So, but for you and me, I'm like top 10, you know what I mean, in my class. And it's like, whatever, I don't have a deadlift, and I'm fine with that. I'm having a lot of fun with lifting anyway. I have a ton of fun with lifting anyway. I'm in my little zone, in my pocket, and I find ways to get enjoyment out of the sport. But I also now, in my age, right, I will not mess with things. I will not train through certain things where before I would. I will just, like, there's no point in me risking this. My gut is telling me just rest today. It'll feel better in 48 hours, whatever, and I'll do that, and And it's if you can go steady longer versus like pushing really, really, really hard and then having to completely stop, obviously you're gonna get farther. It's the fucking tortoise and the hare, man.
Well, and it's hard to be patient enough for that when you're
young.
You know, if you're like a junior lifter who's on the cusp of, you know, winning worlds, like take you know Sean, like I have no like that fits the criteria to like if you want to turn around and, you know, start pushing again, like that makes sense. You know, someone who's, you know, isn't, and nothing against them, but like if someone's not qualified for nationals or something, and it's like they finish a meet, they're a little bit banged up, but they're like, you know, say they missed their third squat and they're like, you know, I'm going to hit it next meet. I want to start squatting on Monday. Like I'm pissed off. It's like, no, you need to, like those situations, I think you just kind of need to protect the person from themselves, or at least offer like some honest.
And there's no right or wrong. There's no like, hey, you need to be crazy. You know, like some guys that I work with, they're fucking psycho, but like I mean, it fits. You know what I mean? You can't. Mm-hmm. I can't make someone like that. Maybe do a lot of like encouragement, but it's like, you know, they have to really want that in order to keep it going like that. So assuming take out the mental aspect, assuming they're ready to go, and they're not competing for like 6 months. How far away from the comp lifts will you get, or will you always kind of keep them in to kind of keep them sharp?
You know, I think there's nothing outside of just, I guess, proficiency for sanity reasons. There's let me kind of back up. So the biggest contributor in the off season, or the biggest predictor of strength long term, is going to be development. You know, obviously you can take somebody who's never peaked for a powerlifting meet, and they're the same size, same amount of lean body mass, and, you know, increase their strength radically through, you know, some high intensity work. But there comes a point where you're going to be bottlenecked by development, and you need to put on more muscle mass. And so I think, and this kind of ties into like the dual athlete aspect, and it sort of works out well in the regard that, you know, my personal sort of view on it is let's spend the majority of the year, you know, assuming, let's say somebody competes twice a year, like Arnold and nationals, you know, so the majority of the year, I would say let's spend that in time that's, you know, submaximal in terms of like absolute load. It's keeping you healthy, and it's contributing to that, you know, primary objective for that, you know, stage of, you know, building muscle. And so it's achieving two things at once. It's like, even if we were trying to maximize your strength, we'd still be doing that same thing, you know. I don't really care what someone's 1 rep max is, you know, 12 weeks out from a meet. And I've used the analogy before. It's like, if you come off a volume block, like you can have a very, very, you know, lucrative and productive developmental phase or volume block, whatever you want to call it, and test your 1RM at the end and have it go down, you know, and you can, you know, to the lifter, it could be perceived as like a failed, you know, this has been a wasted 6 weeks.
But if you did more work than you've ever done before, then, you know, in a couple weeks, you can, once that kind of dissipates, you're gonna be strong.
Yeah. But I mean, that mentality, it's no different than like a bodybuilder, like bitching that they don't have abs, you know, like 3 years into an off season. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not the goal right now. And so, but that being said, like powerlifters enjoy, you know, lifting heavy for the big three. And, you know, in that regard, like there's, outside of just keeping the lifter healthy, like if the lifter can be healthy, like I can use like a squat, a bench, and a deadlift. Like those can be fun. More than sufficient vehicles for development. You know, it's like we can push volume on all of those if we want, and use those as like almost like our developmental tool. You know, like we can build you up, get you bigger with a squat. You know, we don't need to be doing, you know, high bar, or like you can use, especially as the lifter gets more and more advanced, it's like you can use the competition lifts, you know, in those volume phases. But you know, there can be an argument to be made. It's like, okay, you know, let's rotate things through for wear, you know, minimize wear and tear. But what I will do to kind of answer your question is, like, I generally for powerlifters leave, unless there's an injury, I'll leave the big three in year round.
Do you think
it's just like the dosing just gets pulled way back the further out they are from a meet?
Would you say that all work is hypertrophy work? In a sense that you could do
yes,
sets of 4?
I mean you can. I mean there is.
I think people think reps and they think, oh, high reps, hypertrophy, but you can do a bunch of sets of 4. You can do a 4x4 and make great gains on a lift.
So
like
I mean there's a study that Brad Schoenfeld did where it was matched for sets. I think it was 3 sets of maintaining either a 2 to 4 rep max on each load or on each set. So like they would adjust the load each set to maintain a rep max in that range. So 3 sets of 2 to 4 or 3 sets of 8 to 12. The 8 to 12 group outperformed, or like in terms of hypertrophy, had greater levels of hypertrophy. But then you look at, they also have a study looking at 8 to 12 versus I think 25 to 35, and they realize same exact protocol, and hypertrophy was equated. So we know that like you need a sufficient amount of like effective, I mean you can call it like effective reps, reps that are under high levels of motor recruitment and are slow enough tempo, or slow enough contraction velocity for, high levels of tension and whatnot. You need a sufficient exposure to that. And sometimes, sets of 4, like sometimes sets of 4 or like reps below 6, or sets below 6 reps, you start to kind of sacrifice that. And you may have to do more sets to accommodate that.
It's more like mechanically demanding than it is, like, it's hard to explain. It's like,
well, not really. I mean, it's ultimately, it's more dangerous. Like you don't want to, but like you can.
But at like an RPE 6, I mean, you could probably do those all day and be fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's also another study that looks at quantifying. It validates the concept of using sets to quantify volume, like as a predictive measure of quantifying volume. And they sort of determine, 6 reps and above, and then, 7 RPE and above. As long as a set is 6+ reps or 7 RPE and above, like you can kind of compare them in terms of hypertrophy. So, with that said, that also kind of makes a case for the dual athlete. And it's like the kind of the quote unquote power building approach is, I mean, you could, if you're, durable, spend a lot of your time in that 6 to 8 rep range. Never really do reps above 10. Get really strong and probably have close to, if not equivalent, increases in hypertrophy. So
I think the whole power building thing, like I feel like I program in a way in which people would see that someone could look at the movements, my exercise selection, and be like, oh, this is power building. But when people say to me, I want more hypertrophy work, in my mind, it's like they don't even know that they're getting it.
Yeah.
They think that if they do, these single joint movements, that they're just going to build all this muscle out of nowhere.
Yeah.
When it's like, you're getting that. Like, you're literally getting that from what you have, I think for enjoyment, doing the single joint movements, that maybe you just like doing curls, maybe you just like doing fucking single leg fucking cable kickbacks or something. Maybe you like those things. That's fine. You can add those. I always tell people if you want to add that, like, I don't really mind as long as it's not cutting into what we're doing. But like we've said many times now, like, you're gonna get most of your development, if not all, from a powerlifting program that has some accessories on top of it to kind of complete the person. So I feel like this whole like separating them so much is not. What is Berto doing right now? He's fucking squatting.
Yeah.
He's back squatting. You know what I mean? Like, it helps. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna get. It's powerlifting movements are sufficient, like you said, they're a sufficient vehicle for driving hypertrophy.
Yeah.
This was told back to me in 2008 by, I guess you could say, my mentor at the time. And he used to tell me that I was so strong from just doing. In football, all we did was like squat, bench, deadlift, power cleans, overhead press, and that's it. That's literally all we did. And he was saying like, and this was when I was like lean. I was like actually Joey Flex, and I remember I could see my abs through my thermal, which was dope. But he used to tell me if you were to take your strength on the bench press and apply it to like, you know, higher rep ranges, because like 5 was like all I did. He was like you'd probably like blow up, and I would say until I started to eat more, I didn't really start to see, you know, my body develop. Like pushing into those higher ranges, I think did help, but not as much as you would think. Just doing like sets of 5, like a 5x5 is gonna build you. There's a reason why that. I don't even know what it's called. There's like a 5x5 program out there that everybody fucking runs, like as a beginner, which I think is good. I mean, it gets you going.
Yeah. I think ultimately where there's a misconception is, you know, tonnage is correlated with progress, or it's correlated with hypertrophy, but it's not the tonnage that's driving hypertrophy.
I also wanted to go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, it's just it's the total like effective volume. It's like those final like.
So you know, would you say quality? The quality, you could do 3 really quality sets versus like 5 super submax sets, and you know what I'm saying, and like get more. Dude, my volume is nothing. I do like 1 single and like maybe 1 hard set, and then after that I'm spent, and like assuming things are constant, like I'm not changing my schedule. I mean, at least for now, like squats they're just there. I can give a little bit more. I could, you know, each week, and I'm like riding that MRV once you find that kind of little thing. And then I will intentionally go through phases where I'll do, like, I know I'm doing more than I can handle. Pretty much on bench press, I have to do that. Like, I just have to, you know, if I'm not really like pushing my bench to get that little 5 pounds, because I've been benching for like 16 years, dude. Like, you know what I mean? You're gonna get to a point, and someone did ask this too. They asked, what are signs of like nearing your limit? And I mean, obviously weight class goes into that, but assuming like you're staying in your weight class, you're not getting any weight, I would say your rate of progression is gonna slow to a point where you're gonna have to work really, 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 really hard, and you might only get like 5 pounds in a year, if that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I sort of always use that. You know, if you're only increasing each lift by 2.5 kilos in a year, like you're probably either your programming is really bad, or you're just like it kind of the top of your. Yeah. You know, it's like you're probably approaching that limit, or at least you're on the back, you know, the back 9 for sure. So it's sort of a, you know, explaining that to a beginner. It's a kind of a depressing concept.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, your progress is going to.
It's gonna go like.
Yeah, it's like the you know, better you get, the harder you're going to have to work for less return on investment, and that's a hard pill to swallow. Which is why, like, this is a whole other topic, but I feel like, you know, younger guys or, you know, females, you know, the evidence-based information that we have available, you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, knowing what's, I guess, expected, I think can almost work against some people.
Yeah, because psychologically, the reality of it is very.
Yeah, like, why start? You know, it's like, why start? Why start if it's going to take, you know, 15 years to get to where I want to go? No, and like, I probably, like, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I always enjoyed training, but it was almost like that blissful ignorance that got me through my first, like, got me into kind of the late intermediate stage, you know, and so, you know, early on, like, if I were to be told, you know, like, you're natty, you know, there's going to be a limit, or at least like a point of, you know, where you're going to be working your ass off to gain a pound of muscle in a year, I'd be like, nah, this isn't for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was always like I never wanted to be huge. I just wanted to be in shape. And I just can never see myself, further, especially the health benefits. I can never see myself not lifting. Like, so I have that where like I'll compete, and even if I'm really burnt, I'll take like 2-3 days. After that third day, I'm like, I need to get back to the gym because I just start to feel super bloated, and I don't want to do anything because I just feel like shit, and I don't like feeling unhealthy. So for me, it's like, that's why when you say you took a month off, I'm like, were you like active in that month? Were you moving around?
No, I was active, but like also it was like just mentally decompressing too. It was, I mean, you get like at the tail end of a contest prep, it's like it is, no matter how balanced you want to make it, like it's still a huge time commitment. So, I was spending more time, spending some evenings at the house when I would have been going to the gym. It was nice. Like you said, though, after a while, it's like it's part of your lifestyle, and you start to feel like a little bit of a slug. And then that's like when it's like you sort of realize, okay, maybe I think I probably pushed it further than I should have. Yeah. I was pretty lazy there. But in retrospect, it's like I felt, pretty good coming off of that. I had like some shoulder discomfort at the end of prep, and it was gone. So there's benefits to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you earned it, take it. Do you feel that powerlifters can benefit from tracking their macros like a bodybuilder?
Yeah, I mean, I think tracking macros, even as a bodybuilder,
or just being aware of your protein, at least.
Yeah, I always, my stance is, whatever the goal is that's in place, we only need as much structure that's required to optimally get to that point. And I think there's, I mean, we're always we never know what optimal is, but it's like a powerlifter who's, tracking macros down to the gram, like that's a shitload of wasted motion. It's like you don't need to do that. And a lot of bodybuilders don't either. I mean, unless you're in prep and there's, like even in prep, I had pretty forgiving ranges. It's like
if you're hitting certain marks, if you're hitting. Yeah. So for me, I went from 255 Arnold of 2016 to 229 at that nationals, and then I had to drink water to make weight. And I did it pretty mindlessly. Granted, so one of the things that you probably experience from doing powerlifting for so long is that your metabolism is in a really, really good spot by the end of it to diet, meaning off the gate, you're not really going to feel much side effects, and you're just going to drop. You should be dropping, if you were in a surplus for years, you could say your metabolism's in good shape, or as good as it's going to get for now, right? And then once you switch gears and you start dieting down, hormonally, you're in a state that would allow for that to happen. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think, and again, this is another topic. I mean, how do you? I guess I'll sort of bounce this question back to you. I mean, what do you define metabolism as?
So before I answer that, I would define it as being in a state both physically and mentally where you are able to like a good metabolism would be you can pick a reasonable deficit and maintain it without like having second thoughts like a week into it. You know what I'm saying? Or 2 weeks into it or whatever. The point that I was getting to, I mean, obviously there's your metabolism, like in the context in which we're using it, that's what I was thinking of it as, but obviously metabolism is the rate at which you're metabolizing food or metabolizing energy.
Right. But go ahead and finish.
No, I was just going to say that all I did was pay attention to my protein, and I made sure I didn't go over my calories. And I went from 255 down to 229, and it was very painless. I went on a walk like twice a week just for fun, like because Tina likes walking, and it was so painless. It was like I wish. Part of me is like, man, I wonder like what would have happened if I would have kept going. You know, I did refeeds when I started feeling like shit. Maybe I would take 2 days and just I would have one refeed. The next day I would kind of eat at maintenance, and then I would go back to it. And it was very painless, and I felt that, you know, my metabolism or my was in a good place for that to happen. Whereas in the past, I've eaten similar amounts, but I was way leaner. I was like 30 pounds leaner I was like under 200 pounds, and I was like, I was like crazy around food. You know what I mean? So in that context, I would say my metabolism was fucked, or I had been doing it too extreme. I was doing cardio. I was training 7 days a week. I was doing crazy stuff. This is way back. This was in like 2009, you know, 2010, where I was just way too extreme, and I was fucked. Like, it was such a different experience because I didn't know anything back then. I just did what I thought I knew, versus now it was like, this didn't hurt at all, you know? And obviously I'm not going to get stage lean, and I'll never, like, I have no desire to ever do that. So my whole outlook towards a diet is like, oh, it's not so bad. And actually, like, you know, it's like not a fun thing, but like, it's a thing at which I can progress at, and I know what I need to do. And it's not, you know, I'm never going to run into the problems that I ran into if I'm smart about it. You know what I mean?
It's not a complicated process. Yeah. You know, it really isn't. But what I was getting at, you know, in terms of like actual metabolism and like energy expenditure, which is like what your overall metabolism is, like you said. You know, I think a lot of people, like the hormone, they get hung up and sort of fixated on the kind of the basal metabolism. It's like, are my hormones in a state where I can, you know, increase my, or like drop predictably. And like, while there are fluctuations in that, you know, there's metabolic adaptations where your BMR is lower than predicted based off your body weight and whatnot, but it
doesn't change that much.
No, it doesn't change that much, and it's not really even correlated. Like this has been shown in research. Like it's not even predictive of fat loss success, like having a lower than predicted BMR.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a shit metabolism, or like your daily caloric needs can be very low, and you can still lose fat fine.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to compliance and how much you're moving. You know, it's like if a smaller individual, they're disadvantaged. You know, smaller females are at a disadvantage because their needs are lower and they burn less calories through movement. But like, there's nothing when it comes to fat loss. Like there's nothing that can't be fixed, or I don't want to ever say nothing, but there's very, very, like, you very likely won't run into a situation where it can't be fixed with either increasing your compliance, reducing food, or increasing activity. Like it's just managing the energy deficit.
Yeah. Compliance is like such a big one.
Well, and that's like the whole point of bringing that up is that, you know, powerlifters tracking macros, what it can do, I think there is some value in, you know, at least like a month of like learning, like that self-awareness of like what you're actually consuming. You know, a month of using a food scale so you can be like, shit, I thought that was, you know, this much, and it's actually, you know, 200 more calories than I thought, you know, or whatever. It teaches you, and you become a more informed, you know, consumer, I guess, and you're able to make better decisions because you're aware and you've kind of gone through that. Because a lot of powerlifters that have never tracked before, like loosely tracked, it's like, oh yeah, I have my MyFitnessPal downloaded on my phone. Like, I've never actually logged anything. Like, it's just like most powerlifters, you know, it's like, you know, that you put them on some type of a plan, and, you know, they just oftentimes they come back to you and it's like, okay, we haven't lost anything. And immediately I know what the problem is. It's like they're underreporting, or they're just not aware of what they're actually consuming. And so there's a some growing pains there to get them to learn. But this is what this is what actual compliance looks like. And so that's extremely valuable because a lot of people, I mean, underreporting is, even unintentional underreporting, like it is a huge obstacle as an online coach, or as a remote coach working with athletes, because you don't know that for sure. You don't know.
If you're just like, hey, track what you eat, and they just like, this looks like a cup.
Exactly, and like tracking ball, it's like you get them to look at food labels, and then they look at food labels, and then the food label says, which is a step in itself. It's like, yeah,
sometimes
this is
I don't believe them. Like,
well, it's like sometimes, yeah, dude, half
you see the marbling on meat, and you're like, there's no fucking way this thing has 4 times the fat. This is literally like pure fat.
What's pretty funny? Well, I'll tell this story in a second, but you'll get someone like, okay, you need to start reading nutrition labels, and then they'll look at a label and they'll say like oatmeal, like, a half cup. And so they'll measure out their half cup, and then you're like, no, I don't want you, like, that's fake. I want you to weigh that half cup. And they're like, what the fuck do you want from me? It's like it's a lot to ask. But what I was gonna say is, so both, like, I prepped in 2012 and then 2017, and like I got in shape in 2012. Like I was lean, and then 2017 I got in better shape. But both preps, I had like a staple food, which come to find out after the fact was just totally bogus, like the macros on it. So the first one was these tortilla chips that are in town here. It's a local Colorado brand. It's called La Favorita. And their macros on the back, like if you add up the 3 numbers, like if you add up like protein, carbs, and fat, it should be relatively close to the dry weight of the ingredient, like the serving size, And so you would add them up. I think it was, a tortilla chip, like it's like 28 grams in an ounce. That's what a serving is. And I think it was like 2.5 fat, like 9 carbs, 1 protein. It was something like, it was like they weren't accounting for like half of it. I'm not saying. It's like I'm not saying like that it always adds up, and that rule only really applies when it's dry ingredients. But and I guess I can't say for sure that the label was incorrect, but the evidence is very strong that it was. I don't want to get in trouble.
No, you'll be good. But
then that Icon Meals popcorn, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's like,
does it come? Is it like sweet?
It's like that protein popcorn. I don't know if you've seen that. So
they saw like red, white, and blue. I think I.
Yeah.
Okay, I know
that's one of the flavors. So
Tina ate the whole thing once.
Yeah, no, I would like on my refeed days, like every refeed, I would have like a bag of that during prep. And the macros then, I mean, I would weigh it it's like I would either eat the whole bag and like base it off of the weight of the bag, or I would just weigh it individually. But anytime I had it, like the macros on the back were like 2.5 fat, and then there were 4 servings. So the whole bag would have anywhere from like 10 to 12 grams of fat. Well, recently on I forget whose it was. I think it was Con Wolf actually had posted on his story. He was talking about that popcorn, and he looked at the label, and it was the same exact label, but for fat it said 10 grams. For 4 servings. So I don't know if maybe it's a different formula now. I don't know why they would intentionally like quadruple the fat per serving, but it's possible that on these days I was consuming like an extra like 30 grams of fat. Assuming it was accurate. But you know what? It like goes to show, it's like it doesn't mean that the progress stopped. It just meant that I had a higher intake, I have a higher overall metabolism than maybe I thought. So, when it's treated like a constant, it's, which borderline was, like I was having it almost every day. Towards the end there, it was, it's just funny how different, how off labels can be.
I wonder if anybody's going to notice the jump cut. All right, so we're going to get into some questions here. But I left Brian with a question before I teleported, went to the restroom, and came back in less than a second. And I was asking him if he had seen anything funny with, carbs and fat in terms of like calorically. Energy is supposedly the same, but in one instance, maybe the person is on higher carbs, and they're losing better than if they were on, higher fat. I have like my own kind of things to say on it, but I'm interested to see what BD Minor has to say.
I think the key wording there is energy supposedly being the same, because
thermodynamics.
Not really. I mean, I've noticed if you're just talking about carbs and fats, not so much. I have noticed if with protein, let's keep your calories the same. Well, let's increase your protein, because protein has like a high thermic effect to it, so it's going to have a pretty significant or noticeable effect on the expenditure side of things as well. But between carbs and fats, no, not really. I mean, I've noticed I'll say yes. I've noticed positive changes switching from one ratio to another, but nothing that I am confident I could attribute to anything other than what I would think is increased compliance, and just one of them manages appetite better than the other, or that maybe their training has, we increase the ratio of carbs, their training intensity picks up, they burn more calories. But as far as like down the path of like you're carb sensitive or you're carb resistant, we need to change the ratios. In practice, not really, to be honest.
Yeah. Also,
I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I think it's pretty rare.
Also like with higher carbs, you'll probably need to maybe refeed slightly less. Maybe you have more energy going into your workout, so you're able to kind of be less efficient, which is beneficial in this case where like you're gonna expend more heat. One example I can kind of throw at you is let's say you wake up and you do fasted, right? And the thing says that you burned 200 calories in, I don't know, 20 minutes, whatever. You did it fasted, right? Then you do it again the next day, but let's say, or, similar context, right? But you add in, 50 fast carbs before it, and it says you burn, I don't know what it would say. I don't know if it would say you burn the same thing, or if it would say you burned a little more because you have something in your system and now you're going to give off a little more heat. But I would say, like, if we're going distance, like, let's say you run like I don't fucking know, you walk like a 10-minute mile or something, and you know what I'm saying? Like, what would we see similar results there? You're gonna feel shittier after the fasted one, I can tell you that.
At the end of the day, are calories the same at the end of the day?
Yeah.
In both scenarios, then no, I don't think it would make a difference.
Okay, but in that hour, right? Obviously, one you're like negative 200 calories, and the other one you had the carbs, so it kind of like cancels it out.
Yeah, in that like minute window.
Yeah.
Then I suppose, but like, why do we give a shit about that?
because people think fasted cardio is doing something when
it's not.
Because at the end of the day, if you're even, why not just protect muscle? Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I wouldn't totally villainize fasted cardio either, though. Yeah. I mean, I think there's
enjoyment.
There's enjoyment. Yeah, I actually enjoy. I mean, I'm not really hungry, especially deep into the off season. It's like I'm not hungry right when I wake up.
I'm usually dying. Like it hurts. Yeah. Unless I eat a big dinner.
But like I actually enjoy. I mean, I've never really done it intentionally as part of like a fat loss protocol, but during prep there for a while, I would go on walks just before I ate, just because I wasn't hungry. And I'm talking like 20 minutes, nothing that would be like I'm going catabolic. It's like nothing that I would be like worried about. And it just made me feel good. Like it just mentally, just my outlook was.
I used to wake up and I would walk like 2 blocks to the liquor store and get like, I don't know, a fucking Monster or whatever, and then come back, and then I would start my days like that. This was in another period in my life when I was dieting, but it was a way for me to kind of like get in a good mood, start the day off with endorphins.
Fresh air.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have fresh air here, but that's something you have. But so getting into some questions though. I mean, I could go ham on that topic. So like really quickly before we leave it, the whole fasted thing for powerlifting purposes, I think you can get away from it in some cases. I think you should still have like a Gatorade or something, or even a fucking just something in your system, like water at least. You know, if you wake up and you ate enough the day before. If we're just doing some bench, you'll probably be fine. You know what I'm saying? But if you have to do any kind of like aerobic thing or a heavy squat day or something, I would think that you would do better with something in your system. And I know there's a lot of guys, not a lot, but a couple guys that have that train fasted, and they do fine. But at like, let's say they had a weird day and they trained at the end of the day, they're like strong out of nowhere. They're like, oh my god, like, what the hell? And it's like, well, you always train fasted, you know, when you have the bloat and the food in your system and all that, you know, it's the same reason. I mean, even if you're not cutting for a meat, you're going to try to get something in your system before you lift. Nobody's going to do a meat fasted. I would be shocked if someone's like, yeah, dude, I do all my meats fasted.
Well, yeah, and that's a good way to put it. It's like, would you compete fasted?
No.
You know?
So, all right, so getting into some Instagram questions. Again, a lot of these questions were like, hey, like, what body fat percentage should I be at? Well, one, I think percentage, you know, body fat percentage is like, why does it matter? If you look good at a certain percentage, then it shouldn't really matter. But, like, it's not a universal number for everyone. 10% doesn't just look great on everyone. Maybe.
Well, I've almost entirely disregarded any conversations regarding body fat percentage.
Hey, man, what's your body fat percentage? Don't talk to me.
I almost feel like I've earned that right a little bit after prep. But no, it's like it totally depends on the method of testing. Not every method is, you know, you're going to have consistent results within each method. In the end, it's like, what purpose does it serve other than like just your own vanity, you know? It's like being able to.
They calipered me at 6%. This was when I was lean, and I was like, no. I'm like 10 or 11.
Well,
but I'm not.
It's like
no way.
I was at in 2012. It's like I had like my glutes were in. I mean, I was pretty peeled in 2012, and I DEXA'd, I think at 10.9, and I've seen people that I know are carrying more body fat than I was in that prep DEXA like in single digits. Because so it's like,
well, DEXA can be thrown off by like water.
Well,
right?
it can, but it can also be thrown off. Like you have to calibrate the machine. I'm not saying like DEXA is not reliable. It's probably one of the best tools we have available.
The water one is like trash. Like the one where you lay in the tub.
Oh, hydrostatic weighing. That's not as bad. Like it's probably more. There's a decent margin for error there because each person has to expel. Like you have to hold really still. Like I remember in grad school we had one. I don't know like how all of them are, but it was almost like, you know, at the grocery store, like the big like fruit scale, you know, with the thingy. The person would have to go underwater, expel all their air, and hold really still, and you would have to get a reading on that.
Yeah.
And so it's like you get someone who's like just claustrophobic underwater, and they start like fucking thrashing around. You know? And it's like, things just like going crazy. They like, rather than expel air, they like take a huge breath before they go under. You know, so it's like there can be some pretty wild variability there, but. In the end, I think it's a well-intended question, but it shouldn't steer any decision making.
Yeah.
Like there's not. I mean, I wouldn't even.
Yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
argue,
if you need to lose
protein.
weight, just keep fucking losing weight. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
well, and it's like, there's an protein probably should be based off of lean body mass, but even then, like, you're not going to hurt anything if you have a little bit more. It's
Do
like
you have
it's.
a recommended range for, you know, I don't know, the average
I
lifter?
mean, usually, I think anybody who's at, just because it's easy to remember, and the data seems to support it. It's like if you're at maintenance or in a surplus, I'd say like zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per pound. And then as you go into a deficit, like the
1.2.
longer you're in it, yeah, like 1.2, 1.1 to 1.2.
Some guys are doing
It,
1.2 anyway.
yeah,
They're just,
and that's fine. I mean,
yeah.
you're not gonna, it's not gonna hurt anything. Assuming like you're healthy.
Your liver, bro.
But
You're gonna die.
it's I mean, a lot of people get fixated as like, is 1.2 or should I go 1.25? Like, should I go 1.3? It's like, just as a general rule, it's like, as you get leaner, increase your protein a little bit. Like, in the further below like your set point you get, just err on the side of caution and you'll be fine.
That being said, and we kind of touched on it in the beginning, do you need a formal education to coach powerlifting or bodybuilding in the capacity that we do?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Next question is, do you like wearing a belt on bench?
I used to, and actually the most I ever benched in comp, I was wearing a belt. And I think more than anything, it helped me. It served as like it served as a cue that I was breathing, that I was bracing. Like, I don't think it necessarily helps with, like, I'm not even convinced.
As a current fat boy, I am useless without it.
Really?
I can't do shit. Like, I had something to do with just keeping my stomach like up under the bar. Like, I literally benefit from it. I mean, you guys saw at bench nationals, I just pop off my chest and then I just muscle the last couple inches of it. For me, and I would say bigger guys, like I hold a lot of fat in my midsection, I would say it can help keep all of that like together, which helps. Which is also no, seriously, it helps. I'm not even joking. Like, that's why I use it. I am so bad without it. But when I'm leaner, like sub 220, it doesn't do shit for me. And I didn't even use a belt until I got heavy.
Yeah. I think one thing that it can become problematic for people that are a bit leaner is, I mean, we talk about like bench arch, and a lot of that comes down to like your ability to extend like at your lumbar spine. And if you're like, I've noticed like if I wear my SBD belt, I can't get as much of an arch because my back starts to like hit the edges of the belt,
And I mean, the way you're built also would have a, like, if you have like if you can get your belt on and not mess with that little J, you know what I'm talking about? The little J that your lower back would make.
Yeah.
Because your lower back is really what's kind of flexing. Your upper back more so goes the other way, like forward. You know what I mean? But yeah, I could see that. I could totally see it being a problem, and that's why, like with all these things, equipment, you just have to try it. You literally just have to try it. This is a fun one. Do you find Wilks or IPF points important?
I like either or like just
okay,
in general.
So we could do one and then one.
I'm not invested in that argument either way, to be honest. I don't think either of them are perfect.
Yeah.
Like
one completely
you have a bunch
takes Ray William out. Like, he literally wasn't in that second list. He's gone. He's just not even on there.
People are either thrilled or just absolutely butthurt by the new one. So it's just
so it's like a new, it's at the end of the day, you have to out total someone. So,
exactly.
it doesn't, I personally see if something comes up where I need to care about it, then I'll pay attention to it. But for now, I don't give a shit. I literally could care less. Um, okay, so is there any reason? This is kind of one of the riding the line of one of those questions where like if we don't know you, we can't really answer it. But like, is there any reason for an advanced power lifter? So like someone that's been competing for many many years, for any reason for them to change their technique? Um, I mean, you want to go first, and then I'll go.
I think the answer can be yes. You talk about like a squat, say your knees are becoming an issue. It's like you may
Over time they start to feel
go towards more more of a hip dominant squat with less forward knee travel. You may find that you change your bench grip a little bit based off like shoulder discomfort, or it's so yeah. I mean the situation can arise.
So I mean, even for me, my bench grip is always changing based on what hurts, like what's bothering me. I mean, nothing's really bad. It's like if I did low bar squats the day before, my elbows might be toasted, so I need to do a little bit wider. If I had a heavy bench day and I hit something big, then my pecs are going to be gone, so I need to move it in. So, I mean, it just depends. But we don't want to overthink things, guys. We want to, if it's working, ride it till it doesn't work anymore. And then if you need to change change it. But, I mean, sometimes you have guys like Ashton, they just try sumo and then they pull 815. You know what I mean? So it's like, but conventional help build all the way up to that, which is, I think, one of the best movements ever on the planet. We already did this one. How far away from the big three do you get in the off season? Oh, is there any reason to keep singles in hypertrophy phase? We kind of already went over that, just to kind of keep you sharp. Again, everything is hypertrophy, really.
It's just the dosing. I guess
just
the dosing. Like the most, if you could get the most hypertrophy out of a single repetition, it would, like, the most anabolic rep that exists is a 1 RM.
Yeah, you would just die on a single.
So it's just the dosing.
While we're on it, that's kind of why you see guys that do, like, back in the day, I don't think anyone does it now, the daily maxing thing, where there's, if we're talking about tonnage, when they're never going to be a 3x8 or anything like that. They're never going to get close to someone that's hitting, twice a week squats or something, 2-3 times a week squat, but they're able to hit up these giant squats because they're literally like they're getting the absolute most per rep, I guess, that you could get specific to what the task is a max.
I mean, you're driving, well, some of those protocols have, some volume off of each day.
Yeah.
And even if it's not much, like if they're doing it daily, it does add up. So it's, like some of those are pretty significantly high volume routines, but even the ones that are like hit a single, get in and get out, like you're driving up strength through like I've referenced this before. Like one of my favorite analogies is from Mike T, and he talks about like the hardware and software components to strength. It's like the morphological versus the neurological adaptations, and I think when you sort of conceptualize things like that, it makes a lot of sense. It's like the daily 1 RM training, it's like you're training the software, you're training your nervous system to recruit what it has available, and those have a pretty quick return on investment. I mean, that's why peaking phases and strength phases are generally shorter than hypertrophy phases, is because those gains come quicker. So I mean, it's just, each training session is, pushing, one or both of those avenues to a, certain degree.
I just feel like a lot of this is like kind of off topic. The terminology is it's like way more similar than bodybuilding and powerlifting, hypertrophy and strength, like they all together. Like I see it all as like, I get it. I know how to use it in context in which the normal people can understand, but the way that my mind sees it, it's all like part of one entity. It's like one, just imagine it was like a being. Like it's just a protocol that you need them all. So it's like, you know, you don't want to. You need one.
Well,
You don't want to.
hypertrophy is going to dramatically impact strength. Strength is not strength is not a necessary component of hypertrophy. It's like an outcome of overload.
Yeah.
So it's not a like, and I wrote an article on this last year that, you know, was pretty well received. But it's like, you know, hypertrophy, like adding load to the bar, like it's an outcome of overload. It's not a requisite for overload. So you can have, like, if you're, you know, you have these people that are wondering, you know, how much volume should I do? Like the first question is like, are you getting stronger, like across rep ranges? And if you are, like, you already know you're operating above like your minimum threshold. Like, so you don't need to change anything. So I think a lot of people, they sort of forget that it's like, you know, progress volume based off of, you know, outcomes rather than, you know, recommendations or assumptions.
Yeah, and I mean that's also why if you're doing a 3x6 at RPE 7 to 8 and those weights are going up, but you're still doing 3x6, that's a. I think, did you post it? It was like a chart that showed like all the different ways that you can make progress, and one was like add a set, one was like add weight, one was like.
No,
it was
saw that recently.
I'm pretty sure. I don't know if you put it in your story. Maybe.
It may have been a JPS thing.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I was like, it's a very like simple way to kind of show it to someone. So another question here: your powerlifting split versus your bodybuilding split in prep. Is there any change? Was there a difference? Did you use a different split when you were prepping for a meet versus bodybuilding? Okay, could you talk about it and maybe why?
I mean, not like. I was less concerned about frequency, like proficiency in the lift. It's like frequency can sort of be treated, you know, looked at a couple different ways. It can be looked at as a way to add additional volume, or it can be looked at as a way to increase, you know, skill acquisition and proficiency in the lift. You know, I know I was able to. Like, I don't need a third day. Like, I can be getting sufficient enough volume with allocating volume.
For bodybuilding purposes.
For bodybuilding. Well, even for powerlifting purposes, too, minus, like, the skill acquisition side of it. And I think most people can, to be honest.
Dude, I literally low bar once a week.
Yeah.
One day.
So, it's, I mean, there's going to be exceptions, but, you know, I basically ran, like, an upper lower split. For
bodybuilding.
Yeah, so I would train lower body twice a week. Upper body, I would basically have a full upper body day and then like a push and a pull day.
So your body, I mean, you can kind of think of it like this: like your powerlifting prep, you're thinking about training lifts, whereas your bodybuilding prep, you're training body parts, you're training areas. I mean, they're both.
So you're still training lifts. They're just.
Well, yeah, because you don't.
Lifts that train muscle groups.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll even train. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a bodybuilding program that includes
bench squat.
I mean, right now, like I have, you know, a number of people that are focused on development that might be squatting and benching within the same session, but it's like the intent of the block is development. And so, I mean, there's so many different...
Those are literally fantastic developmental movements.
Like, the template is less relevant than the overall volume per body part.
And this last question here, and we can kind of cap it at this, unless you had one that you wanted to...
No, I got it.
How important are bodybuilding movements for powerlifting training? So the reason why I want to break that down is because, like, a powerlifting movement can be used as a bodybuilding movement in that mindset. You get what I'm saying? That is like the whole point of this whole podcast. The main thing I want to really hammer home is like they help each other and they are together. You know what I mean? If there was a new word, power building, we could just say it. they literally help each other. You literally can gain from one just as much as you can gain from the other. But if you well, why not just use them both? You get what I'm saying?
And you need hypertrophy to be the best powerlifter.
Absolutely. I mean, there are the top guys are absolutely going to have substantial gains.
When I look at it that way, when I look at it as like development is such a key component of strength, and injury is the biggest bottleneck for people. Like all of a sudden, a lot of these programs end up looking more like a bodybuilding program. Not body. It's still like the template is still more oriented and frequencies are more oriented for powerlifting, but the overall volumes in the developmental phases are very similar. It's just like we're using the power lifts, a little bit more than we would in a bodybuilding phase. So it's frustrating that people sort of treat them as totally separate.
Put it like this, yeah. Let's say you have bodybuilding over here and you have powerlifting over here, right? And let's assume you're always going to do some level of squat, bench, and deadlift, no matter what. It's just the little meter, the dial is in the off season. It's going to probably be more on this side, and then as you get closer to a meet, it's going to get over here. If you're someone like me, you're going to kind of go between middle and over here. If you're someone like maybe Russ, for example, I let him throw in. He likes to add in his bodybuilding stuff like on top of it, just because it's like enjoyment. I had him on a 4-day split, and he was like, "Joey, man, like I miss going to the gym. I want to be there 6 days a week." And I'm like, "Let's do it. Go in and hit it if that's what you like."
Here's one thing that I personally think of when I think of programming. I think of it in the most simple format. I think of like 3 knobs. You have like a volume knob, a like intensity knob, like the actual like intensity of load, and then you have like a specificity knob.
Uh-huh.
And it's like you just dial those for what's appropriate for that phase.
Yeah.
It's like intensity down, specificity up, in turn, that relative or the intensity dial goes up too. It's like you get hurt, let's dial everything down a little bit. It's just like that's what you're managing. You're managing volume, load, and how specific the movements are to the competition lifts. Like that's it. Like in managing frequency, using frequency as a tool that falls under that umbrella. Like it's not. Is it.
Would you say like, in a prep you want to? Do you move your days around a lot in a powerlifting prep, or do you try to keep your days on like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or are you okay with day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4?
I try to, but I fuck it up all the time. Like it's like now anymore. Like I try to stick to days because like Mondays, for example, are like my heaviest work day. And recently I decided like it feels wrong taking a Monday off from the gym for me for some reason. Like it's like Monday is like the first. It's your day one, Yeah, but I've started doing that recently, or at least like I train like arms on Monday, and like I literally do it like I have my office in my basement, and I have a gym in my basement, and I'll like train arms. Like yesterday, I trained arms like in between emails. It's like just sort of like mindless shit like that. So, but I try to, but I don't have any issues. Like I would say 50% of the time something gets shifted around just out of necessity.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think people...
That was a doozy.
Yeah, no, I really think people can learn a lot from this. You want to go ahead and let people know where they can find you?
Yeah. I guess the main place is probably Instagram, just at BDMiner. I have a blog. It's myojournal.com.
I'll ask you for that, and I'll put it down below.
And you can access like some of the coaching information from there too, and there's like an intake form if that's something that anyone is interested in. So.
Yep.
And also, I do work also with JPS out of Australia. They're a company, and we have like a personal trainer and coach mentorship course that's pretty incredible. If you're looking to like further your education, that might be something you would be interested in as well.
And of course, guys, make sure you pick up that strength and nutrition book by Dr. Eric Helms. That'll be in the description down below.
Pyramid.
Click my link. It's great, right? It's got everything in there. It's such a. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
No, it's a book that would have eliminated so much wasted motion early on in my training career. It's an excellent book. Like I own it. I bought the first copy and I got like a free upgrade for the second one.
Yeah, and Eric and Brian are homies, and they do lots of different stuff, podcasts and things, and different discussions together online. So if you guys YouTube that, you guys can find them. Is there a name of the series where you and him sit down?
Oh, he had me on for a anecdotes and observations.
I like those.
It was I think it might have been a two-parter originally. It was talking about like rep ranges for hypertrophy and strength. That one was good.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
I'm gonna put that down there. But yeah, guys. All right, Brian. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks a lot, dude.
Guys, let me get a hashtag brain gains down below, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.